Well, hello, everybody. I had the honor of welcoming you to the Grolier Bookshop. My name is Carol Mankiewicz. My husband was Ifani Mankiewicz, who loved this store. He bought it from Louisa, I think almost 16 years ago. Is it, James? Maybe, I'm not quite. And he really felt this was a sacred place. He felt that poetry was going to bring the world together. And I'm sure many of you feel maybe the same way. So enjoy yourselves tonight. We have a wonderful reading in order. And I also want to say hello and welcome to the people who are on Zoom. There's about 40 people on this little Zoom camera. And I also want to thank James. We are very blessed to have James as the manager of the school. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Carol. Thank you so much, James. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being here on Zoom. I hope I can see who you are later. This evening's reading celebrates the welcome return of two poets who once lived in Cambridge, where I met them many years ago, and a celebration of a third who's been in and around our area for some time. They'll be reading in alphabetical order. Get my little props here where there is, which brings me to Charles O. Hartman, first up in the alphabet. Charles's connections to Cambridge go back. As an undergraduate, his CV tells me he published his first poem in the Harvard Crimson. The CV also tells me that he lectured for the Grolier in 1983, which was just some months after I met him and just after he had published his first book, which I have. Between that first Cambridge reading and now, Charles has published 7 collections of poetry, including most recently New and Selected Poems and Island, show and tell, both of which I have here under my name. He's also published a variety of influential critical texts, including Free Verse, an essay in prosody, a 1981 book that's still in print, a recent introduction to formal prosody, and a book on computer poetry. He also has a book on jazz poetry and song that reflects the fact that he is a jazz guitarist. The range of critical titles is mirrored in Charles's poetry. He's been a formalist off and on for years, though the majority of his poems display a mastery of free verse. A writer of memorable short lyrics, he's experimented in long forms that include Except to Be, a series of prose poems that lives up to its title by never saying am, is, are, and 2 long sequences in Island, which also include several poems he wrote in Greek. Along the way, he's experimented with computer poetry, co-authoring a book of same with Hugh Kennan. His recently completed 8th collection, from which we'll be reading, is Downfall of the Straight Line. The word that most comes to mind when I consider these poems is attention. I come to my own attention, he says. And so he does, observing and exploring the significance of actions and momentary thoughts most of us would simply leave alone. Similarly sustained is his attention to the creatures and things of this world. One thought leading to another, and sometimes beyond, as he gives voice to pianos, to a donkey. There's attention to language, always, and its sounds, to the origins and nuances of words, and to syntax. There are wonderfully extended sentences here, echoing his ever-expanding thought, which has him, as the last poem in his collection says, living the near to learn the far. Please welcome Charles Hartman.
On the other hand, he's not as live on his feet as he once was. Thank you, Martha. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, the Grolier. I lived in the wilds of Connecticut and taught there for many years. And our big corporate presence there is Pfizer. You can boo or whatever, but they did sometimes have a Connecticut College faculty member come in and give a class in the summer. And I taught one of those one year. So the class 5 days a week began at 7:30 and ended at 8:28, which is when everybody had to go back to work, which made for a very interesting work day. Up for a 7:30 class, 8:30, you're done. And I must have talked a lot about the Grolier during that time and how everybody should come up here and buy poetry books, because at the end of the class, they gave me a gift certificate to the Grolier. So I got to browse through. So thank you all. Some poems. I will mostly read from the collection that I've just finished, but I'll begin with one that's older. This is the first poem in my new and selected poems, and it's called Maybe So. We have a little time here, and are so small it can seem endless. We begin by seeing the light, which is too bright, and end in seeing it go too dim. Between we have jobs and babies, opinions, loads of opinions. We have friends, lovers, and we learn how little our opinions mean because of them. We discover fear and take years to grow intrigued by it, find out how live we are on the edge of the bridge. We discover love and recognize it as fear. Between, we ask what the agenda is. The agenda is the end. Never mind. And the light, every day from its beginning and ours, sometimes more and sometimes less, comes back to begin us over. Just when we think we knew the front yard's routine, arrives the cardinal, too, the bright tangerine of her beak, the only thing in the world her wide eyes can't see. The pick of his pert chirp slung over and over at the rock face of the morning, that blank shirt he exposes garnets in. We shake our heads and go off to work, because work is what we do, and that is its definition. You know this. I know that. We have a little time here. We stockpile batteries and pens, saxophone reeds for some, for others sheep. It's all to the good. They tell us it won't count. We know what counts. Maybe it's even because of all we know, all we have done, that a kiss comes in the middle of an afternoon. Not a new kiss, if that means new lips, new shoulders rounded into our awkward arms, but still a kiss that stops time for us, stops us short on the bridge, as if it had got rid finally of its end and its beginning. We remember that. Even at the end, we remember the beginning, when the light looked over our shoulder and made us memorize every leaf, every feather, every fear we came to love with, and the love. The donkey in the air. While I stood as usual, they added stones to the back of the cart, presumably behind the axle. So, not suddenly, but at some tipping point, the market square began to fall away. Look at that bell tower. Who would have guessed? Meanwhile, the chest, supposed to hang from the firm arch of the spine, ached in harness. The clapper lolled. If I've been sure of anything, it's footing. Now I find less traction than a swimming dog. could try what the birds do. No, you're gaping. I would too. I have a couple of ideas, which unfortunately involve hands. You capped fool with the camera. Why not scurry to unload stones, return me to the useful earth? No, this is too much fun. Snap on, develop, print, make a postcard to amuse your tourists from Pakistan to Naples, till it slips into the fist of a Greek who will do a trick to transpose my hung, ridiculously elevated body into a picture of his own village to shame the locals. Then one of you can turn it into words, also good for bandying about. Always glad to be of whatever service in the quarry of your decades. At last, since nobody wants to deal with me dead, somebody starts lifting off counterweights. No plummet, just hind legs, a little kicking, watch the tail, then 4, back in the belonging dust. That's settled. You may have seen that photograph somewhere. It really is all over the place. The pianos has an epigraph from the Grateful Dead. All graceful instruments are known. Amid so much sleep, we remember the waking phrases, iterations bored or rapturous, resounding hours, rehearsals of the opulent impromptu, the melody sketched by a right hand once and let drop. We almost remember the 100 hands, thousands of operations, fashioning us for the sleek showroom, the dim loft, the highly favored dorm, the not quite defunct club, solarium, atrium. Among us, we have taught some children what they are. Whether we're grand, the satin titan with mammoth underbite, or upright, but spinet is an ugly name, everyone has a fall-bored eyelid. We all need work. My felts haven't been pricked for years. The sostenuto's flabby. A long life can be ghastly, last decades in an untunable basement, peeling, untouched, even into noise. Once on a loading dock, Steinway CD 318 and I passed back to back, Gould's own on loan to Evans. This was before the fall. Another I knew stroked Tatum's fingers, then Peterson's, a junker by then with a fresh coat of paint. When monks burned, everyone went dumb for a day. When I first came home under the round window, even as I heard the truck's pads and dollies trucked back in while guys flexed shoulders for the next, on that still first morning, I answered Bach with Bach, and when at last she stood and away from me to speak to some others, I knew her heart was mine. From the sublime to the father. A poem called Peripheral Vision. An optometrist told my father his could have made him a great truck driver. They test for that. Around the curve of the century, I see him at it, a violent road volunteer, long haul and lonely. I see him as peripterist, owner of an Athens corner news and sundries hut, vital to daily life, the neighborhood's central intelligence, a veteran among veterans, the wounded and the war widows, ensconced like a fighter pilot behind ranks of magazines and chips, bus tickets and sunglasses, books with the spines outward, goods on the outer slope, heaped at the angle of repose, the least expensive, the most visible. hunched on the stool in his 2-meter cave, room for one, eyes on everything, manning the panopticon, watchful of wares, purchased port on the swarming street with side slats to guard first and third base. Shelves inside piled to the apex with condoms and cigarettes, guidebooks for the less demanded languages, everything in reach. At the back, the hatch. It must have been my father who took me to see Violent Road. My mother wouldn't have. Or was it The Wages of Fear, French with subtitles, which A Violent Road remade? In the age of knowledge, no way to know. No one to tell me. I see myself son and heir and near double in spirit, as in want of those leather blinders for a horse between shafts to keep it focused, keep it from being spooked. If only not to remember, only I wander out here, street legal, with no commodities, footloose, or as they call it, free. Moonlight. Bless her who blessed us with this gift, this bauble, Pharaoh's paraphrase of Earth's, our satellite, a bubble to make your room a fable of seeing through the night. This 3D printed globe, crater by crater true, minutely rough, as is, no doubt, the original to the soft hand of God, hankers to show us us. Who knew it was so light, that clinker in the sky, to rest its ounces on a wireframe cube of basswood? Who knew it had a button to switch from gold to rare blue and dim it too? We said this afternoon, looking ahead tonight. Last up turns out the moon. Two more. This one is newer than the manuscript, so this is. I don't know what follows from that, so, but here it is. This distance. If you think you could hear the heat, it's probably cicadas you're remembering. At this distance, you don't feel it. Don't be ridiculous. But you put together an angle of vision steeply uphill, and the raw rub of the backpack you gave up years ago, and crushed sage and time, and you are as there as you habitually are where you are. Down below, the sea must be a bathtub, so small are the boats, the smacks and catches, the ferry leaving along its long curve. The notion that you could be there and here is a difficult and necessary dilemma. As soon as you try to assemble words for it and realize that you've taken them from 2 languages, you've lost it again, and hold it as fast as anything, any moment you can grasp. Last poem. I made a city. I made a city walled in wood and set it in the sea. I named the flood our gravest good and surety. We watched the clouds that are and read the wind for way, living the near to learn the far of the last day. Storm rains cuneiform on wave recorded our long lore. So all we gave we might yet have if we reached shore. I settled us on the tall hill, where wisdom rests her soul. And the owl lit on the old sill and made us whole. Thank you.
Hear me. I forgot to say, by the way, that I'm Martha Collins. Next, in this alphabetical order is Betsy Sholl, whom we're welcoming back to Cambridge from Maine, where she lived for many years. She lived in and around Cambridge in the early 1970s, which is when I met her, probably at a poetry reading at UMass Boston, where I was teaching. She was a founding member of Alice James, which published her first 3 books, including, I have this too. This first one. Some of us remember. This first one, which introduced me to her work. She's gone on to publish 7 more books, most of which have won important prizes, including the AWP Award for Redline, the Pollock Prize for Don't Explain, and the Borlaug's Prize and a Maine Literary Award for Otherwise Unseeable, a book that's meant a great deal to me. She served as Maine's Poet Laureate from 2006 to 2011 and has won several other awards as well. She's taught in, I quote from her website, a range of institutions from elementary schools to prisons to MIT and the University of Southern Maine. And she currently teaches in the Vermont College MFA program in creative writing. But this evening we focus on her most recent book, As If a Song Could Save You, for which I had the delightful pleasure of writing a blurb. And also the hardship. Writing a blurb for a book you really like is a little like writing a haiku. So much to say, so little room. So I'm going to finish by reading both what I said and a little of what I didn't have room to say, including some of Betsy's own lovely words. In her exquisite 10th book, threaded with news of an imperfect natural world and a complex theology, Betsy Sholl creates an encompassing vision of nature and spirit, past and present, self and others, music and word. Keenly alert to a world that's a mixture of hope and dread, to a beauty that's stumble and lurch, where healing is blended into hurt and the light that falls is knit with shadow. She leads us on a journey toward a difficult but sustaining wisdom, always going griefward toward the gorgeous elegiac poems of the last section. Yes, it is hard, she says, but there are gifts, including these poems. Please welcome Betsy Sholl.
I'm bringing my phone, well, to time myself, but the truth is I always forget to look at it. Don't we all?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you, James. I only hear wonderful things about you. And Martha, I have seen Martha be generous to many, many people and also generous to me, which makes me realize that a poet can be a wonderful poet and a very fine, generous soul at the same time. You know, the last time I read here, I stuttered on one word for a very long time. So I hope I don't do that again tonight. And Charles and I, we were students together a long, long time ago. Do you want me to say how long? Yeah, 53 years ago. So, I'll be, see, I didn't look. Sorry, I have to just really think about how to count numbers. So, I have some poems before I talk about grief, and I will read a few. Can you hear me? I just realized I'm not on the microphone. Oh.
Do you want to move back?
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Yeah,
wherever you want.
that's great. Thank you. So this first poem goes back to being assigned a term paper in high school where I had to compare Chaucer's and Shakespeare's Cressida and Troilus and Cressida. But I'm not going to talk about Chaucer. The daffodils. Either I wasn't thinking, or I thought I could cross the prison window on my way to the town library and not be a wound to those men, a flower to pluck. My teacher intended no crime, assigning the term paper on Shakespeare's Troilus and Cressida, but enjoyed my discomfort as he explained the racy puns. I found Shakespeare guilty of not even trying to make Cressida sympathetic, as if she had been false for no reason but her own pleasure, conniving, slutty, a pair of hips sashaying past soldiers gathered around their small fires, as if a girl with no currency but her body wouldn't know how thin the line between wager and ruin. Memory's crime, the way it falters, seduced by feeling, more fiction than fact. Was there a walkway beside the prison? Locked up long enough, a memory will re-enter the world hesitant, unsure. Could there really have been open windows, men calling out, reaching through the bars, young men? So not unlike these inmates in my prison poetry class, I've just asked to make metaphors for the daffodils I brought in. Periscope up, one calls out. Testing, testing, another says, holding his fragile mic. And I don't know what to say when a third, as if taunted, pained by the mute reveille of these bright trumpets, asks, why are you doing this to us? As I could see about this book, the second section was sort of political poems, and the third section was sort of pure spiritual poems. But then when I looked at the book, I really couldn't tell the difference, you know. So I will read you. This is supposedly a political poem. I was obsessed with the White Man March in Charlottesville, Virginia, 2017. And of course, Charles Wright lives in Charlottesville. So this is called On a Line by Charles Wright. God is the fire my feet are held to. He writes from his yard in Charlottesville. And first I picture not marchers, but my father's black and white world, his walls and gates to keep everyone in place, going up in smoke and charred souls. Today, the sun turned its back on us, leaving snow, rain, deep slush in the road, so cars whooshed by like monster angels, slashing the air with huge transparent wings. Such a heavy sky, low, a winter white, not even close to the color of my skin. Who decided to call us white when we are clearly a pale beige version of the rich gleaming dark we came from, watered down, as if that makes anything pure. Get over it, my sad brothers, storming hateful and hoodless through town. Read Dante before rage makes you gnaw your own flesh, leaves you glaring under burning muck, flakes of roof, rebar, smoldering cars. If you don't like to read, give a listen to Thelonious Monk, his tunes seared clean and spare, hammer and hesitation. The way he fingers the keyboard, you know it's true. The piano ain't got no wrong notes, but it does got under and between notes, over notes, bent, blending, got Monk playing not sorry, but wake up. So maybe the flame God holds our feet to could be cool if we toss in our lies, my brothers, you're them or us. If you saw, my father, how they're burning us up inside. So this is supposed to be a more spiritual poem. I have two sisters, and they each appear a couple of times in this book. One is a musician. One was, as my mother said, the smartest of the bunch, which tends to have problems too. Anyway, and she's died, so that comes in here. This is called Whatever Alights. A zillion yeses to the titmice at my feeder, to their silky gray backs, their white bellies tinged with rust, their little black eyes. Yes, to the fruit and nut mix that draws them, to the runner who scares them off, the nuthatch who comes back first. And yes, to my sister, suddenly back from the dead as if from Austin, calling the bird silly for the way it spirals along the tree trunk upside down. And why not? Yes, as well, to her taking the last of the cereal, the wine, retelling the plot of her novel, Memory's one door she can still open. After years of being smart in 4 languages and dumb in the dialect of feeling, years of so what to the birds and how stupid the crepe myrtle. She's back, gentled, and because a woman, she sings as I fold laundry, songs from Cameroon. She who worked hard and grudgingly for God, as if God were more chore than marvel. She who divided the world into like and dislike, useful, useless, broken, fixable. I wonder if on the other side of the river, that Rio Grande only the dead can cross, the birds are no longer nervous, the air free of predators. When she returns, my sister no longer limps, hardly grumbles, or says stupid when really she means sad. It's as if she's back inside our mother, hearing the soothe of muffled cadences before words, before yes and no, whatever hurt her, whatever alighted, and then before she could hold it, flew or was snatched away. So, so the last part of this book has a lot of grief in it. My amazing husband, a brilliant husband, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And we went through that for 7 years before he then died of COVID. And, you know, I guess it's a disease that treats everybody in different ways, but he was a great guy. And I think the way he handled this disease is maybe the greatest sign of him. So this is a poem about that. It's called One Step. Who am I to say to the man, you can't sleep in corduroys and a dress shirt, or don't stick your fork in the potatoes, spoon them onto your plate, as I must have said more than once to our children. To the man, I would have said, what does it mean to be saved and from what? Or I'd ask about a friend's blunder. How can somebody so smart do such a dumb thing? And he'd half smile, then shake his head. Don't you understand? It has nothing to do with brains. How can I tell this man, you can't sleep in anything that has a leather belt or a wallet in its pocket? And here are your pajamas, which he puts on inside out, so the flannel pockets flap like limp fins, and he laughs and flutters them a while before we start again. Right foot and right leg. He laughs too at my schoolmarm self, asks, how did you get so bossy? Me, he once held through months of sorrow, who without him might never have swum up from those dark waters. Who am I now that he is no longer that man, and we are something other than we ever imagined? Saved, he would say, in part from ourselves, whatever in us is grasping, fearful, controlling. Into what, I'd ask, and he'd roll his eyes, knowing better than to answer. Or he might say, as he did more than once, into gratitude, my dear, and one step at a time. As now, left foot into left leg, and here is your nightshirt, I say. Do you want help buttoning? Not yet, he says, not yet. So I got impatient with him one day. He was a therapist and a theologian. I got impatient with him one day and kind of said, for this. And he said to me, you shouldn't be impatient with me. I have a brain disease. Okay. What are you going to say? So, one time I said to him, I wonder if I'm a little angry at you for getting sick. And he said, I wondered when you were going to figure that out. Like with a therapist. So this is a widow poem. It's called Widow Walk. Two more. Widow Walking. I don't want a day when I never think of you, but I would like more in the morning news than another briefing on your absence. I miss hearing my name as summons to a kiss. If we can't step into the same river twice, with the past, it's not even once. Memories are hot watches, knockoffs pinned to the insides of my coat. I open it and become a flasher. At least the wind is wild today, the trees in a frenzy. If I wore a wig, it would be long gone, snagged in the crook of a tree, but good for containing something that starts off fragile, then grows wings. If you are a spirit now, can you hear me? Or are you so far, or have you left our flesh too far behind? Somehow I've landed at the shore where late sun makes the seagrass glow. And for a second, I don't want to hold you or anything. Not moonrise in the east or sun gleam in the west, not the path of watery light washing my feet. Still, I can't help talking to you. Grief is a heavy coat dragging the ground, but death is very cold, so I wear it. So I will just read one more that I think is a little more positive. It's a prose poem, and it's called The Birthday Party, Ferry Beach, and it comes out of my grandson asking me if it was hard being a grown-up. He was 10. It was his 10th birthday. And the first 4 words, the hand of God, are in italics because the speaker's overhearing that. So the birthday party, Ferry Beach. The hand of God on the lips of a bikinied woman as she trudges through the sand with a friend. Could be wind or a burning tree, a stranger brushing her shoulder, or maybe a kind of answer to the boy newly 10 who's just asked if being a grown-up is hard. What to say? Even the history of these stones tossed by waves and now skipped across them by the boy may include fire, ice, crushed ferns. So little is straightforward. First, the kiss he gave his mother, then his squirm out of her arms back to the water. Whoever said love isn't complicated, if he wasn't a fool, must have passed through some burning gate found only by those who have stopped trying to grasp or explain. How to tell the boy none of us knew when we agreed to breathe, crawl, walk, read, that the journey would not reveal itself in advance. So our best maps are dreams, Escher-like roads that dissolve, then reappear, looped through tilting scaffolds. But never mind, never mind. Now the boy's mother photographs the sky, slant of clouds rippled and glowing, a sermon in which awe overwhelms uncertainty and dread has no place here, where low tide reflects the splendor overhead. Yes, the sky will dissolve its radiant path, as if to say, looking elsewhere is not the answer. This will turn into that, cake into crumbs, bright wrappings into balled up trash. And yes, it is hard, but there are gifts, child, gifts, you among them. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. And finally, coming at the end of our alphabetical lineup, Michael Todd Steffen. Though he's gotten around, and I should say, I forgot to mention forgot to read the part of Charles's bio that says he's gotten around too, and that he is coming to us from New London, Connecticut, where he just retired from Connecticut College as poet in residence in an endowed chair. Let me start over with Michael. Since I'm giving everybody else's bio, I just skipped that part because I couldn't see it at the beginning. All right, here we go again. And finally, coming at the end of our alphabetical lineup, Michael Todd Steffen. Though he's gotten around, his degrees include one from Sussex University in England, and he lived in Pittsburgh before coming to our area. He's been a presence in our local literary community for some time. He works in environmental and nonprofit marketing, but many of us know him as the organizer of poetry readings in the Hastings House series and elsewhere, and more recently, as the founder and organizer of multi-reader productions of works like T.S. Eliot's Wasteland and, coming up in October, Seamus Heaney's Station Island. More importantly for us tonight is his own poetry, which has earned him a Massachusetts Cultural Council Fellowship and an Ibbotson Street Poetry Award. His poems have appeared in a number of journals, including the Boston Globe, Everse Radio, and The Lyric, and he's published 3 books. His first book, Partner, Orchard, Day, Moon, was published in 2014 with these words from David Ferry. Michael Steffen is so alive in his writing, keen with observation, and on he goes. But tonight we're celebrating On Earth as It Is, published just this year, or last year. Sorry. Like Charles Hartman, he cares about language. There's a lot of wordplay, sometimes etymological, and the smallest phrase can surprise and delight. An indecision of clouds, a strangely good guy, the ancestral stubs that are fingernails. As David Ferry notes, he is, like our previous readers, a great observer, here often of the natural world, from a housefly to, as his wonderfully resonant title has it, Earth as It Is. But it's not just the immediate present that Mike is concerned with. He looks back to our origins, referencing myth, but also noting in geology that the garden was well stacked before our first parents. And environmental marketer that he is by day, he looks with concern toward our future, but also with joy. The dire poem, how dare it be charming, he asks, and answers with this lovely book.
Thank you, Martha. That was very kind. And Betsy and Charles, I'm honored. And James and Carol, thanks so much. Very honored to be here this evening to read for you. I'm going to start with some new poems. Most of what I read will be from the new book, On Earth as It Is. I have a few things that I wanted to, some newer stuff. So my first poem for you tonight is called Cubism. So many steps descend a staircase. It looks as though they're here to stay, thousands of views comprising a scene, whether to define subject or action. How the partial headline announcing a flood, El Diluve, complicates the study sketch of a guitar left as a study. How things never seen before appear as a light fixture in a ceiling, an antique arm holding forth an electric lamp at Guernica, the now infamous town of the massacre with a rodeo. Or the portrait of the artiste extraordinaire, himself resembling Sylvester Stallone. Look at Juan Grise's Picasso, 1912, and tell me I'm wrong. This all boils down to say we need to look and see again until the nudes announced in the titles are unrecognizable as desire. If you can't steer clear or go around, shatter right on through it, whatever it is, a cup, a saucer, a sleeve cuff, tuning peg, each left as a study, almost reassembled into an almost place of study. Steady now as a flock of starlings into a neat cloud that another look knew couldn't hold that way. Moments of fluidity, drops of water. Got a loose screw? In this machine I am assembled and rattled. Am I nuts? Out on a limb? Gone bonkers? Thumped me head on a beam in the aft? Am I daft? Loony with my howl of a song in the dark water's edge. As the girl said, what's love got to do with it? The Colosseum. The Colosseum, built on the outskirts of the Flavian dynasty, this oval in the heart of modern Rome. Shift is center, even in the eternal city. Earthquakes and despoilers of stone wore the colossal structure as warm shower water wears a bar of soap. Tourists' eyes widen in admiration. They grin at the wonder, well knowing its history of fierce-mouthed gore and glory, lions and giraffes, whose fur and feces ferried exotic seeds. The emperor's ounce thumb here prompted the sinews that jabbed Gladius and heaved Spatha. In tiers of colonnades, it is itself. While years, decades, centuries have seen its limestone chiseled through with holly, thistle, knapweed, cypress, tribes of leguminous peas, some 400 species of plant life, the botanists in the once seminal age of science around 1850 listed amid its crumbling stairs and walls. The decay, the past eager renaissance lamented as overgrown, lost, fallen. Yet trees reached from its parapets with fruit. Long grass swished on its porches. Nature's presence patiently allaying the old pit of fight. No two sets of eyes see the same ruin. The first poem here, sit with this uneasiness. Little vessel of my soul, sit with this uneasiness, tied to the wharf. A big gull wheels to land and lose its ease. Your tackle and sails are stowed under the threaded and knotted eyes of the canvas. The wind wakes, the water begins to chop, ropes groan, stern and bow knock, knock. So of the trinity that Freud gave us, I added a fourth, the super id. The sea, ever wagged by its tail, its all continuum, seals playing out into the horror of an orca's play, with little mind for manners, appearance, plasticity, the business of the sails of cloud stacked like the coast's glass mountains, these aeolian beings, drawing from it fertile rain, shimmering nets and devastating storms. Great unself-consciousness swims between one's hunger and another's, from deep memory clear to the shallows of our shellfish. And our muck, threatening its copious data of marvels and unmasking me, boy wizard on the shore of the ponderous metaphor. Gloria Mindock has done a great job editing both of my books. And so shout out to Gloria tonight, who said she'd be watching me. Trivia Bartlett Press. Very grateful for that. It's called All Imagery, this poem, All Imagery. It seems all imagery without a story, watching the flakes of snow fall in the window while people talk about global warming. Who would know but that tomorrow morning comes with surprise weather to renew the news? The images keep changing. What's the story? End of the world. Now, shouldn't that be alarming? Keep busy, business says. Nobody knows. It's just a lot of hoopla, this global warming. My neighbor's selling his winter house in Florida. Summer can hibernate with us in Scarborough. I'll move mother and her TV up a story and add the ground floor out for rent as roomy, inexpensive with the beachfront view. Ha ha to some dumbass in denial of global warming. The dire poem, how dare it be charming? The reader ought to feel as much as know. Or it's just imagery without a story, like the earth spinning after global warming. I don't know how many generations have, back in the 50s, I suppose my parents were sort of worried about the atomic bomb, and that's scary, having your little part of the world blown to smithereens. But when you're thinking of the whole earth melting and just flooding together, what we're handing to these kids these days, some anxiety, but anyway. I had a lot to say in this poem and only a haiku to do it in. Doggone. Where are you tonight, my patchy Dalmatian, with your noses wet nudge? I wrote this poem some time ago when I just come back to the Boston area from a visit with my parents. They live out in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We cook, we eat food, we play cards, we go for walks, and we watch a lot of Westerns. Wagon Trail, Bonanza, Gunsmoke, Rawhide with Rowdy Yates. And I'm a fan of both of them, Rowdy and Yates. I've just come back Tuesday. I got back from spending 3 weeks out there. So the poem comes back to me as being very fresh. And it's about visiting home and about watching TV. It's called Western. And mom and dad are watching. So hello, mom and dad. The sums of my shadow set on old Westerns, the way I still get into it, tensing at the gunfights, clutching, wincing like the actors to their wounds. The whisper of "look out" to the sheriff who's being snuck up on in the abandoned one street of the town. The shadow flitting from the general store to crouch behind an unhitched wagon. There's the strike of a match on the boot heel to light the outlaw's cigar, bringing tension to our breathing in the wild country of sagebrush and rock formations. In this one, they wear 2-day beards with greasy sweat on their faces, holding their pistols, looking out the windows, while Ma and Pa sit with their arms and legs tied by ropes and chairs in a sparse decor, table, wood stove, shelf with books and trinkets, evoking home on the range. The strangely good guy is on his way. From out there in the dark of night, his bullet will report through one of those windows. The bandits will break the rest of the glass out with their pistols to shoot back at him. Here in the living room, even though the movie's growing close, with those two bound to surrender and the other two to be freed, we grip the recliner's cushions, digging in for the resistance of the shootout, not quite ready to go to bed. And with that, I'll read my last poem tonight, Going to Bed. Going to Bed. And thanks again, everybody, for coming out this evening. Going to bed. Best not even raise the question how long the book you've just closed will take to darken on the bedstand under the lamp you've just put out. You don't even wonder whether you've closed your eyes. You keep seeing things in the spectrum of the language in your mind, now and then surfacing to the present like a swimmer for air, to pull off your t-shirt because even with the fan blowing, you feel too warm. And to find the low rumble of the plane taking off odd this late at night, perhaps with next day cargo. Driving down a country road in Oklahoma once, you pulled over to take a leak and far away from the city's lights, looked up to marvel at the stars in thick clusters. As probably we would look to heaven if we had fire in our DNA like lightning bugs. An idea that changes positions to find comfort with the body lying here in its nightly rehearsal with death, which would similarly wonder where we are headed were it not that we are already mercifully caught up in going there.
Thank you all for this really fabulous reading. Can we give another round of applause for all three readings?